Alright everybody, here's the 95 Viper RT10. This is the first time I've had it on the rack. I already did go ahead and pull the drain plug and get that oil draining because it's been a while, I'm sure, since it's had an oil change, and I want to get all of that out of there. So it's been draining for a while. The only thing I have done to this car is the tires were really old and in bad shape when I got it, and I did not like the Gen 2 chrome kind of Euro looking wheels that were on it. So I picked these up from a local guy off of a Gen 5 Viper and bolted them on, and the tires are in pretty decent shape. They're Pirellis, and I figured I could roll on these for a while until I figure out what I want to do. Now eventually, when I get the stance right, I would really like to bring back the look of the goofy 3-spoke wheels that these cars came with. I know they're really weird and a lot of people don't like them, and I think a lot of that is because of the fender well gap. They were a 17-inch wheel, and these cars sat kind of high in the wheel well area. It's all drooped out right now, so that's not how it sits on the ground, but I think if we close up that wheel gap, and then possibly down the road, I'd like to see if I could have some custom billet versions of the original 3-spoke wheels made in like a 19 or better wheel size, 19 by 13s on the back and a 19 by 10 in the front, to get this car A, to fill in the wheel well gap, and B, to have a little bit more ground clearance in the front even when I have it slammed on these coilovers, because these cars are really low, and as you can see on the front bumper, every time you pull in somewhere, it rakes this bottom piece underneath. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it just rakes that front piece. And although you can't see that when the car's on the ground, it just sucks. Every time you pull in somewhere, you just hear that dragging. So it's going to get even worse when I slam it with these coilovers. And I think that a little bit taller wheel and tire with the lowered stance will fill in this gap on the wheel wells and make this car just look awesome. And if I could build a retro 3-spoke wheel that kind of brings modern to that 90s look, I think it would complete this car and just set it off. So anyway, let's get a look under here. It is a little dirty, just from what I've seen. Everything's original under this car. It was in, on the Carfax, it was in one accident with the previous owner. This car's been through quite a few owners, which these cars have, because they're not for everyone. They're very raw, they're very crude. They're, I wouldn't call it harsh, because they're pretty comfortable, but I think a lot of people get these things and think they're going to be a Corvette or something that's daily drivable. And although I would love to drive this car daily, I really enjoy it and all of its quirks and weird things not everyone does. So I think that that's probably why these get tossed around a lot, and especially the ones that have a few miles on them. The ones that are collectors, it seems like people bought them and just stored them away and just didn't even enjoy them, and that just sucks, because these things are just made to be driven. Dodge put everything they had into this car. They didn't have a lot at the time to put into it, and that's why I think it's cool to check out the history on this car, because it's really a cool, challenging story that Dodge went through bringing this to us. So anyway, there's the giant oil pan for the V10, and it's really cool that the way they designed the frame, the engine sits completely behind the crossmember. So if you ever had to do main bearings, that would be really awesome, because the oil pan could drop straight out of the car. Anyway, the frame looks really nice. All the control arm mounts look really good. The car, like I said, was spun out with the previous owner. He said that he hit gravel and spun the car, which is very common in these cars, and you got to be very careful when you're inspecting one of these to buy it. A lot of these got wrecked, so look at your Carfax, look at your history, and know what you're buying. I knew this car had been wrecked. I also, from talking to the previous owner, knew who had repaired it, and he is a local Viper tech that has a Viper garage that specializes in Viper repairs. And he worked for Dodge for a lot of years and was a certified Viper technician. And he's the one that put this back together. And it wasn't a major wreck. He spun it. He said when it spun, it hit a curb, and they had to replace what appears to me as some suspension components on this side of the car, the driver's side, because all this stuff is clean. And you can see when it was apart, they painted the rotors and the calipers are clean. Whereas on this side of the car, the originals have a little surface rust on them. So I know that they had this side of the car apart. I saw that when I bought it. And what I was looking for was any kind of damage in the frame rails, the control arm mounts, the alignment points, stuff like that would make the car go down the road goofy. And it doesn't. It drives completely straight. Now, as we go back, the underside's not all beat up. The floor pans are really nice. All the panels are there. Nothing is leaking on this car. There's a little bit of a weep. Looks like old from possibly the rear main seal or the front of the transmission, but it's not actively leaking. It's dry, so that I need to just clean that up and watch it. Probably put a new rear main in it when I do a clutch. That's down the road. Rear end's not leaking. It still has the original tag on it. I doubt the oil's ever been out of this rear end, so I will be doing that. It looks like it's got the original gasket maker. And again, back here, same thing. These arms and suspension is all clean and new, and this side's kind of dirty. So I know that that side's been apart, and that just shows that the Viper technician that worked on this took a little pride in his work, and he cleaned everything that he put on here to replace. So all the bushings on the rear end look okay. The U-joints look okay. I can't find any play in the rear end. I've been checking ball joints and stuff like that, and I don't see anything. One thing I did notice, it's kind of hard to see. I don't have the greatest light. I need to work on that in the shop, but the sway bar end links, which are right in here, the boots on those are a little torn, but there's no play in them. So unfortunately with these cars, it's very hard to find parts. So know that when you're getting into a first gen Viper, that the parts are not easy to find. No one makes them anymore. There's some stuff out there, but not everything, and it's a little challenging to find some of the parts. So I'm searching for some sway bar links. In the front, let's take a look here. I don't see any front main leakage. The belt looks okay, but let's see. I think we have a flashlight. What do we have there? DC compressor's got. Yeah, it's really dry, but it's kind of hard to see, but something's been hitting on the AC compressor. Oh, the rack and pinion has. Yeah, the rack has been actually hitting on the AC compressor, and that would be why right there. The rack and pinion bushing is completely shot. Look at that. There's my wander issue right there, my smoking gun. This one doesn't look quite as bad, but let's see. Oh yeah, it's hard to see with the camera, but there's my play. When I push the tire back and forth, the rack and pinion is actually hitting on the AC compressor. It's moving that much, and it appears that bolt is loose. So that's something we got to address right away. That's going to be my smoking gun for my steering wander on the highway. I bet you is that. That's going to be huge, because as you go down the road and the tires find grooves, it's just going to move the rack and pinion back and forth and let the tires turn back and forth. So that we got to take care of right away. I have read about those being a problem, so I kind of knew about it, but that's worse than I thought it would be. So got to get those coming. They do make solid aluminum bushing, so I'm going to look into that. I've seen those on some of the Viper parts places, and that might be the key to tighten up this front end. So anyway, all the coilovers look in really good shape. They're original, so I'm going to pull those off and probably resell those. That sway bar bushing, or sway bar end link boot is ripped. All the tie rod ends seem pretty tight when I pull on the wheels, and boots aren't ripped. Rack's not leaking. Some of this residual is from the grease. These are greasable ball joints, so I'm going to have to re-grease those, and this all needs to come apart and just get cleaned up before I do an alignment. I do want to do a big brake kit on this car, so when I do that, I'll probably pull the suspension apart and clean everything. So anyway, that's the underside of a 95 Gen 1 Dodge Viper, which would be the same from 92 to 95. 96 was they kind of call it a Gen 1.5. It's kind of in between the two. That's the year the GTS came out, but the RT10 version was kind of in between. So they're kind of a little different, but still very similar in appearance. Still got most of the original parts. What's this tag say? Dextron 2. I definitely need to change the fluid in that as well, in the transmission. What is that? Oh, that's kind of cool. 5/26/95. That was the year motor when the motor was built, and that's probably the signature of the guy that, the initials of the guy that built this engine, because these were done by hand on a factory for Dodge. So these were all hand-built motors. So that's pretty cool that that's still on there. So yeah, there's that little bit of a leakage right there. But again, I need to detail the underside of this car. I will plan on making it back to really clean and nice, but I want to address all the drivability and maintenance issues first, and then we'll start diving into performance parts. Alright, so the oil has been draining for plenty of time, and it's not dripping anymore, so I know I got almost every drop out of it. So let's go ahead and put our drain plug back in. Now the drain plug does have a magnet on it right here on the end, and it has this molded gasket on it, so you'll want to inspect that. These are the same on almost any car. There you can see it. So you want to inspect that gasket, make sure it's not all tore up, or you will have oil leaks, and then also clean this magnet off so you're not putting dirty stuff right back into your engine. The magnet was pretty clean on this. I'm happy with that. There was no chunks or nasty material or anything that would make me think that stuff's floating around in the pan, so that's good. So we'll go ahead and throw our drain plug back in, and we'll go ahead and torque that to spec. Oh, there you go. And we'll clean that off a little bit so we don't have oil sitting there. And our oil is drained. Now it's time to get that oil filter off of there, which is probably going to make a mess because when they stuff this big V10 in there, they put the oil filter right above the frame rail. As you can see, no one cleaned it before, so the frame rail is kind of dirty. Let's see how this thing goes. So that's going to drain right on the frame rail, and oh wow, I actually got it in the right place. So we're going to go ahead and drain that for a couple minutes, get the filter drained out, and we will get our new Wix filter ready to go. I like Wix filters. I'm not sponsored or anything like that, but I've always used them on car stuff. They have a little bit of weight to them, so you know there's more material in there. This is their XP model, which I don't know what the difference is, but they say it's for synthetic oil, so I picked one of those up. And some Mobil 1. Now I like factory filters. You can still get the factory Viper filters. You have to order them through one of the Viper specialty places. I guess there's still some floating around in existence, but I'm going to be tearing this motor down eventually, so I don't want to get too carried away because this is going to get dropped out of here again fairly soon, and I'll show you why right here. So one of the stereotypical problems of these Vipers is the head gaskets. So when they built these in their infinite wisdom, with all the overbuilding that they did with this big V10, and you'll learn a lot about that and if you watch some of those videos on YouTube about the history of this car. But right up here, if you look from below, you can see right there is our factory head gasket, and you can tell that it is still the original paper gasket, which kind of sucks. But I knew about this when I bought a Gen 1, and this is one of the only problems with these motors, is that head gasket, and I planned on building this up a little bit anyway, so I wasn't too concerned. But you can see right here on the engine the staining on the block, the aluminum block, from that head gasket weeping. And if it's leaking externally, I have a feeling at times it probably leaks a little bit internally, and we don't want that. So we are going to have to change the head gaskets. Now when I do pull those off, I do want to send them out, have them ported and polished, and have some work done on them, and then update the head gaskets to the newer style MLS head gasket, so we don't have that leakage, and probably go to some ARP bolts for what's coming in the future, which eventually this thing is going to get under some pressure. Alright guys, there's that monster of a V10, 8.0 liters of 90s technology. Now, it is not a truck motor like a lot of people say, like the Dodge Truck V10 of the era. This is completely different. The casting was actually developed with Lamborghini, and then it was completely developed for this car, so it is entirely different, but incredibly bulletproof motor, except for those head gaskets that I show you. These are pretty stout motors. The first generation and early second generation are fully forged motors. The first generation is said to be extremely overbuilt, and it was kind of heavy because of it, but it does have forged steel crank rods and pistons. Alright, so I went ahead and filled the V10 with 9.5 quarts of Mobil 1 synthetic. That is what it calls for from my sources. And while I was under here, I was looking, because one of the things that I've read that is a problem with these motors, let's step under here, is the power steering pulley supposedly was plastic, and they would break and fail, and that would leave you stranded, but this one is actually steel, so I don't know. Let me know down below if you guys know anything about this. Did the 95s come with a steel pulley, or was this changed out? And also, I've seen an aluminum bracket that mounts the power steering pump for sale, saying that it replaces the factory plastic bracket, but this one is aluminum, so I don't know if someone's already been in here and upgraded these things, but it does look like this power steering hose has been replaced with something newer. And you got to keep an eye on this, because I've seen several people that have had close calls with these failing, and your exhaust manifold is right behind it. So if this fails, you're running your car hard, these exhaust manifolds are hot, or even on the street and this is hot, you could have a fire. And you don't want your classic Viper to go down because of a stupid power steering hose. So keep an eye on those things. So anyway, our power steering fluid is good, our belt is good, our engine oil is full, so let's go ahead and give her a start. If you guys aren't familiar, to get into one of these when the top is on, you have to actually grab this ring. This is a zipper. You unzip it, then you stick your hand through and open the car from the inside, because there are no door handles. Pretty interesting. We are in neutral. I believe the clutch safety switch has been disabled on this car because it will start without pushing the clutch. Alright, and that completes our oil change. I will go ahead and let it sit for a minute, and then I'll check the oil again later. But let's move on to the next thing, which is going to be our coilovers. Now, whenever you do suspension altercations for ride height, it's a nice thing to have a starting point to go back to, so you can compare what you've done and see the changes. So one thing I did before I pulled it on the lift, I went ahead and measured on each fender well I centered my tape measure to the ground with the center cap on the wheel, and went up to the lip on the wheel well and put a little piece of tape and recorded that measurement on all four corners. This way, when I'm all done and I have the car settled and I'm adjusting my ride height, I'll know exactly how much it was lowered and be able to alter that ride height and compare it to the original. So we'll know exactly how much these BC coilovers lower this car. So let's check those out, by the way. So here they are. They are super nice. Not sure what kind of bushings these are, but they look super sturdy. And it does say right on them for the 92 to 95 Viper. And from what I understand, these are built to order, so they don't have a lot of these sitting around on the shelf for a first-gen Viper, because not very many people are modifying these cars. So these were a custom order, and I went ahead and had them upgrade to the Swift springs, which are supposedly a higher quality, better riding spring. I worked with them on the spring rate, and they preset the ride height to just their standard, and then we'll have to adjust them with this bot. This is for your preload on the springs, and then this is for your ride height, and you use these spanner wrenches to adjust that. And then up here on the top there is a basically a valving adjustment that you can turn this knob to fine-tune the ride to your liking. So that's kind of cool. And they do have boots on them to protect the shaft inside there, which is cool. They look really nice. I'm excited to get these on the car. They took a while to build and get here, but they're here, and we are going to get this Viper to look much, much better in the stance department here pretty shortly. So we got the wheels off of the Viper, and it's back up on the lift. I went ahead and checked my oil, and that's all good. Now let's take a look at the front suspension on this guy. It's pretty simple. So it appears that we just have one bolt on top, one bolt on the bottom, and I need to go ahead and take off this sway bar end link, which I'm looking for replacements for because these boots are torn down here. They don't seem to have any play in them, but they eventually will with that boot leaking the grease out, so I'm going to look for those. But unfortunately, like I said, these cars are a little tricky to find parts for these days, and no one seems to have those anywhere in any of the parts houses, or so I'm probably going to have to go to a Viper specialty place. But let's get these stock coilovers out of here, and bear with me this time, guys. I'm just filming with my phone, but I do have a better camera, and I promise that I'm going to get these videos polished up a little bit to where the lighting and stuff is a lot better, and hopefully I'll fix that leak in my shop over there from the airline. I apologize for that. That's kind of annoying. Just, of course, started, so I got to fix that so you don't hear an air leak the whole time. But let's get these off. Let's check out the rears too while we're over here. You can see why I want to do a brake upgrade. Look at these little tiny calipers. That is funny. Performance cars nowadays, the calipers are huge compared to these little tiny brakes. So that's definitely going to be upgraded. Oh, that control arm's really weird. That's interesting. This one looks even easier. Nothing's in the way back here. So let's go ahead and unbolt these, and I'll check back with you when I got these off, and we'll test fit these BCs. Get this Viper on the ground. Alright, so the bolts come right out of the coilover with the suspension drooped out. They pop right out. There's no pressure on it or anything on the front with the car supported off the ground. If you're doing this on the driveway, it's completely doable. You'll just have to jack your car up and support the frame with jack stands and let your suspension droop out so there's no pressure on it. That's the safest way to do it if you're doing it on the driveway. But I did run into a little snag. The sway bar right here, I took the bottom bolt off here to lift this up so I could get it out of the way to remove the bolt for the bottom of the coilover, and it hits the upper control arm when you raise it up, so you can't get this all the way up. So what I'm going to try to do is use my handy transmission jack to put a little bit of pressure under the rotor, lift the suspension up. There's no pressure on the suspension now because the coilover is not attached. So I just want to basically support this and lift it up just a little bit so I can see if I can snake this out without taking the sway bar off. But if you're in the driveway and you had your car on jack stands, you could use a floor jack to do what I'm doing here. Or the other option is to simply take all the bolts out of the sway bar and remove the sway bar first to get it out of your way, but I'm trying to sneak this out without doing that. So let's see if it works. Alright, we got these ones out, and as you can see, the one on the left has definitely been cleaned really well. It's still an original, but it's been cleaned and before they put together the replacement suspension. But guys, check these out. Oh man, those are cool. If these ride half as good as they look, I'm going to be happy. They slide right in, the factory bolts get used, and then what I did, I always on coilovers or shocks that are adjustable, up here there's a dial to, I don't know if you can see, it says hard and soft right here. I always set these in the middle to start. This way I can, if I like it, I'll leave it alone. Then you can play with it. You can go softer or harder and see how it acts on the car and how it rides and how it handles, and you can play with this to exactly how you like it. And at first I usually move all four the same amount. So I'll put these in the middle, we'll go drive it. If it feels too soft or too hard, I'll go one way or the other. And then once I get it pretty close, then I start dialing in the front and the rear together. But I usually like to keep side to side the same. So on your front, you'll want to count the clicks and make sure the other side is the same so you don't get any goofy handling characteristics. But these have 30 clicks of adjustment. So I went ahead and went all the way soft, and you don't want to bind that adjuster or wrench on that adjuster. They turn very easy by hand. When it stops, that's it. Don't go any farther past that or you'll mess up the shock. And then I counted the clicks to the middle, which is 15. So I went 15 clicks, which puts it right at the center of the dampening. So we'll see how that feels on this car. These look absolutely amazing. Definitely cleaned up the appearance of the suspension, and once I get this all done, I want to do a detail on the underside of the car and the suspension and really go through, because that's really rewarding on an older car, especially one that's nice and it's just grimy. You can really spend a little bit of time and some elbow grease and make the underside of your car look very presentable. So this is never going to be a show car. I'm going to drive this car and hopefully keep it forever. This is the car that I always wanted, and I just plan on driving the wheels off of it but I like to take care of my stuff and keep it looking really nice, so I will do a detailing on this, and I'll show you how to do that in another video. But how about those coilovers? Those look awesome. I'm really excited for those. My wife actually got me these. She knew I wanted them, and for my birthday back in September, these showed up at the house. It was pretty awesome. I don't know if your wife is that awesome, but mine sure is. So anyway, there they are. Look at those things. I'm really excited to see how it rides and how it sits. So let's get the other three on. The process is pretty much the same. I did not have to take the sway bar off. I was able to finagle them out. I just took the lower mount off of the sway bar, and I was able to kind of lift up on the suspension and slide the bolt out and then slide the new bolt back in. So you do not have to take the sway bar off. I'm sure every car's tolerances are a little bit different, so you may have to, but in this particular instance, I did not. So it doesn't look like I have to take anything else off on the rear. Just unbolt the coilover, bolt the new one in, torque it down to factory specs, and let's get this thing back on the ground so we can see how it looks. Alrighty, so got all 4 coilovers on, got it back on the ground, and what you're going to want to do with an adjustable coilover is you got to drive it. These things need to settle just a little bit before you make any adjustments, and you're going to want to be a little careful because your alignment is going to be off when you're driving this around. You don't want to go get an alignment until you get your ride height set, because that will change as you change your alignment or your ride height. So I went down the road just a ways, went over some bumps, and just to kind of get a feel for it and see where the ride height would end up after it settled just a hair. Again, it's going to settle more as I put miles on it, I believe. But this is where we're at right now. This is after maybe 2 or 3 miles driving it kind of on a little bit of a rough road. So definitely better than before, especially in the back. The back is getting there. It's very close. So remember I had you, I showed you to do those measurements and put them on a piece of tape. This is why. So this is how you tell how much you actually drop. So the rear dropped just over an inch in the back, and that's really close to where I want it. I want to go a little bit lower. There's plenty of tire clearance. So we're going to mess with that just a little bit. Probably leave it for now and drive it to see if it drops a little bit as I put miles on it. But I definitely want it to go down a little bit more. I want to close in that gap right there. And then I think it'll be perfect. But this looks way better than stock. It was much, much higher, and I kind of failed on this video by not taking a video of it prior to putting it on the lift, so you guys didn't get to see it before, but maybe I'll figure out how to put a picture in here, a before picture. So anyway, this is where we're at. We dropped a little over an inch in the back, and we dropped about 3/8 of an inch in the front. The front's way off. I still need to go down quite a bit in the front. If I get down, you can see that fender gap that's just driving me nuts. So this is where I thought, these wheels are staggered. This is an 18 in the front and a 19 in the back. And this is where I think a 19-inch front would help me out, because I wouldn't have to rake the car as much, and then that nose wouldn't be quite as low for road imperfections and stuff. So, but these are the wheels I have for now, so we're going to live with it, and I'm just going to adjust the suspension to look the best it can with this setup until I figure out a different set of wheels for it. But this is going to look killer with the black wheels and with it dropped. So I got the wheel off. I got it jacked up just here on the ground, and basically what we're trying to do is on the coilover is we're trying to shorten this distance, this threaded distance right here. So we're effectively shortening the height of the entire shock assembly. The preload comes stock, so there's 2 lock rings right here. You don't want to mess with these. These come preset, and you really don't mess with these unless you're trying to put more preload on the springs to change the ride characteristic, but you probably don't want to mess with those. They come preset, and it's probably something that you won't notice that much of a difference until you get on like track use or something like that. So they're set up from BC Racing, so leave those alone. So basically what you're going to do, these are locked together, so you loosen this one down here, roll it up a little bit, and then you're effectively screwing this into the lower body, which shortens the shock. And that's how you adjust the ride height on your car. And obviously you have to have the wheel off, and you have to have the weight off of the suspension to do this. The other thing that I failed to mention is whenever you do anything that is modifying your car, whether it's a car or a truck or anything, you want to go back over your hardware after you put some miles on it. So not only do you want to do a final check to make sure you tightened everything up and didn't forget anything, because it could be dangerous if you forget something loose. You also want to go back and double check your torque specs after you put a few miles on it, just to make sure nothing is coming loose. So that's a good idea to always remember with a lifted truck or a lowered car, anything. It's just a good idea to double check your torque. So anyway, I already moved this one a little bit. We're going to see how much that changes, but what you want to do is lock this ring back down and then take a measurement basically from here to here. Just pick a spot on the shock so you can measure and then repeat it on the other side, so your ride height will match on both sides. And you will notice that all cars weigh a little bit different on side to side, or they can sit a little bit different side to side. So once you get it in the ballpark range of where you want it, you can really go back to your height from the fender to the ground, get it where you want it, and then fine tune it side to side, so you know that your car is 100% level and looks the best it can on both sides. You don't want a gap on one side and not on the other. That just looks horrible. So those measurements that we did in the very beginning right here will really help. And if you're trying to dial it in, you can use a longer piece of tape and keep writing your measurements as you go. I just did the original measurement so I could compare to there, and I'm going to do a visual as to where I'm going and then measure the shock down here to match the other side. So anyway, that's what we did, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this tire back on, set it back on the ground. And every time you make an adjustment, you want to kind of bounce the car a little bit after you get the tire and get it setting back on the ground. Roll it back and forth, because anytime you let the suspension droop out, you put a tire on, set it on the ground, the tire kind of binds on the ground, so it's not going to give you a true accurate measurement until you move the car back and forth and kind of go over a couple bumps and stuff. So don't get ahead of yourself. Make small adjustments, see what it does, move the car around. Even if you have to do this 4 or 5 times to get it right, it's worth it to dial it in. If you go way too much, you don't want to have fender damage or something like that from a tire rubbing. So go a little bit at a time, drive it back and forth, check your tire clearance, and you can always go lower. But also remember that those coil springs are going to break in just a little bit as you put miles on it. So you want to leave the car just slightly higher than what you're after, and it will come down just a hair. Every spring's different, and every coilover company is different. So I don't know how much these are going to actually break in. I've never used a set of these Swift springs with a BC coilover, so it's a little bit of a trial and error for me too. But just as a rule of thumb, usually springs do sag just a hair as they break in, so remember that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and measure this distance, record it, and drop the car on the ground. We'll see what it looks like, and then if we like it, we'll go to the other side. Check it out, guys. This thing looks so much better. I am really excited for this. Down on the ground, the fender well gaps closed in. This thing just looks menacing. I am super happy with the way it came out. Very rewarding project to be able to do in just a couple hours. Throw some coilovers on, get your stance right, and completely change the attitude of your car. Looks so much better. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Let me know down below if you want some more Viper content, some more hands-on installs and repairs on this car. Would you rather me go for more muscle car stuff? Maybe some off-road stuff? Let me know in the comments. Looking forward to this channel. Shout out to BC Racing for their awesome coilovers. I'm super happy with the install and how they came out. I'll leave a link to them in the description down below if you want to click on that and check them out. They make stuff for all different types of cars, import and domestic. Anyway, please like and subscribe. Hopefully you enjoyed this. And I hope you have a great day. Take care.